Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Behind the Adventure Show. I'm Danielle.
I'm Calvin, and we had to change our positions because the sun was glaring off the GoPro, if you're wondering. We're still here in Azalea Campground here in Kings Canyon National Park, and we figured while we're here, let's kill some time and talk about
stuff and things.
Yeah. Thank you, Jimmy.
So for those of you who are new to the show, this is a show where me and my travel buddies, we talk, we joke, we roast each other, and we reminisce about adventures past and all the spontaneous craziness that ensues that never makes it onto camera, or maybe it does on rare occasions, but it still gets cut in the final cut. But this episode is going to be a little bit different because this isn't necessarily about trips or footage. This is more about what is the origin story behind this partnership. How did that all get started?
Dumpster fire duo.
that still seems to work. So yeah, I figured I will let Calvin start this off.
Oh, that's a terrible idea. We knew each other from school. We fell apart. I found Danielle on Facebook. End of story. That's the end of the podcast. See you guys later. I'm kidding. There's more to... Okay, that's the story in a nutshell.
That's like the nutshell.
Hey, you tell me I elaborate too much, so, I'm trying to condense it. Just a little bit. No, okay, all jokes aside, though, we both were in the same homeschooling group growing up, and we kind of... It's how it is, like, when you know people...
We knew of each other, at least... I think it was around high school, because I
knew of you well before then, but it was more like in passing.
I guess so. I didn't really know you that well, though. Like,
what, you didn't know me as the dude that racked up all the science fair awards for Trinity?
I wasn't as plugged into Trinity as I think a lot of other people were. I was kind of more on the outskirts, so that was probably part of it.
Absolutely shameful. How dare you disgrace all those hours I put into those science fair projects? Okay, see what I mean by the dumpster fire part?
Well, sorry.
It's okay. I don't have happy memories with all of them. That's moot point.
So yeah, I think it wasn't until high school when we were both in Honor Society Club, I guess. You have fond memories of that.
Don't go there or I will hijack this thing. Honor Society sucked.
To be fair, okay, yeah, I didn't really like Honor Society either, to be honest. Yeah, what was Honor Society? That was basically...
A cult. Sorry, you've really opened the floodgates at this point.
Maybe it was an overachiever club or something like that. Yeah, neither of us were really thrilled to be in it. It was more like our parents wanted us to do it, but it was basically like a club where you would do extra work. So you would do projects like you would audition for the drama team, or you would join the basketball team, because yes, our homeschool group had a basketball team, or you would go write a paper on something.
Or you cooked something off the King Arthur flour bag and brought it to an event, and that's what I remembered you as, was the girl that brought the bacon things from the King Arthur flour bag, and Smurfy and Fun Trash forced us to eat it. I'm disguising their real names to be polite.
Random extra work like that outside of school. And I think there also was a day where they were teaching us job interview etiquette and stuff like that, which
I wasn't there that day.
I actually thought that was kind of useful, but other than that, yeah, it was one of those things that we were kind of both begrudgingly there. But hey, that's where we, I guess, officially got acquainted, because I didn't really know you before then, even though you kind of knew me in passing.
I knew a lot of people, I'll put it that way.
Yeah. So, fast forward past high school, we fell out of touch, and yes, as he said, he randomly messages me on Facebook one day when Facebook became a thing. Well, granted, it was a thing it was a thing for a few years before I actually jumped on it.
Ditto.
And I'm no longer on that now, thank goodness. But back when it was a thing and it was still like, you know, a semi-fun place to be, yes, he messaged me on Facebook saying, hey, how's it going? And I'm thinking, who is this random dude who is messaging me on Facebook? This is a little weird.
Yeah, sorry, I am the king of not smooth introductions, obviously.
So I was asking him, wait, who are you again? And
I'm
then,
the multi-time Science Fair Award winner, Calvin Witt. I didn't say that.
and then when he like described who he was and stuff like that, then, you know, the memories started coming back. It's like, oh yeah, I remember you. We were in honor society together. Man, fond memories, quote unquote. So yeah, we got back in touch and we started talking, and yeah, just kind of we started hanging out. I dragged him along to go paddleboarding for the first time.
I have to think, I mean, I'd done kayaking as like a little event in the homeschool group that we were in, and absolutely loved it. And then Danielle's like, oh, you love kayaking? You should try this thing called paddleboarding. Mm-hmm. And I'm the guy who can't even walk on a curb without getting dizzy, or I can't even walk down the street sometimes without tripping over myself, contrary to popular belief. I would absolutely fail a sobriety test, even though I am stone cold sober. It's pretty sad sometimes. I have lots of problems, clearly. But no, the thing is, it's like, I was like, oh yeah, paddleboarding. You just want to see me fall off the paddleboard. That's going to be really fun. No, I actually did way better than I thought. I didn't fall off, and I pretty much stood the whole time, I think.
Yeah, you did pretty well.
It was actually not as... It was way more fun than I thought it was going to be, because I loved kayaking because you could go super fast. But heck, even the other day, we went paddleboarding / kayaking, and after we switched boats and I took your paddleboard back to get the car, I'm not gonna lie, I went most of the time standing up, and I'm like, dang, I forgot how much fun this is. It's not as quick as kayaking, but it's kind of fun that like I'm, you know, just cruising on top of the water feeling. But yeah, it was you who really kind of started the whole, hey, let's go out there and do things.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I think it was that paddleboarding trip that kind of set things off as far as like going off and doing random outdoorsy stuff.
Because it's like we'd met up and had, you know, hung out together and whatnot, but it's not like, because it's not like we actually like went out there and did anything crazy until you kind of brought that up, and that kind of really got the gears going in terms of, oh, Danielle does like doing outdoorsy stuff. Because I know some people are kind of like, oh yeah, that sounds great, but I don't know what traveling with you is like. And I completely respect that. I'm very particular who I travel with. I'm going to make that very clear. There are some people who are on the I will not travel with them anymore list. There are some people I will totally trust traveling with. There's people who I'll give it a try with. But it's the how do things work out between the two of you that really makes things work.
Mm-hmm. And that also, I think, could be the origin story for filming stuff as well.
That too, because it's like
you brought your GoPro with you.
I already had the YouTube channel sort of going, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, to document this. And then I made the horrible mistake of letting you mess around with the GoPro one of the times after we went paddleboarding at the beach.
I had never touched a GoPro in my life, and I did not know how the thing worked.
Yeah, case in point, as mentioned in another episode, you accidentally...
Sorry, bug.
Oh, yeah. You accidentally took photos instead of like filming a video, because I don't think I told you how to use the camera very well. I was just like, oh, you just see this in the films. Not like I'm so used to using it. I grew up in my dad's television class. I'm so used to filming things that it's like, then you were like super upset afterwards. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's no big deal. I mean, it's not like we still didn't have fun. You know, I may not have had a great video to put on Facebook because of it, but so be it. You know, we still had fun. And I think that's really what kind of got things going, is like, you know, don't beat yourself up over it. You can have fun. I'm not going to worry about it. Just don't break or lose my camera, please. That's really all I ask.
Of course. Yeah. And yeah, I think it was from there. And then there was the whole thing about you started like 3D printing your own camera stabilization rigs. And then you wanted me to try that out when I came up to visit you when you were living in San Francisco.
And I couldn't, I legit, I swear, it was you, me, and your good friend. We were all we were up in San Francisco back when I was living with my grandmother up there. And it was really cool because we got to do a whole bunch of stuff with that camera rig that I swore we'd never get to do. Using it inside the airplane when you were flying with my buddy Ken, when we were walking across the Golden Gate Bridge, going around and seeing the sights in SF. And this was back when the rig was hyper jank-o-matic. I'm talking literally a battery taped to a little 2-cell lithium battery that was powering through the little voltage booster to drive a car backup LCD monitor with this giant big Chungus cable running into my GoPro Hero 2. Like, this thing was as jank as it gets, and yet it somehow worked. And I remember handing it to you on the Golden Gate Bridge, like, hey Danielle, do you want to just like mess around with this thing and film some stuff? And all of a sudden you're just like getting all these epic shots, and I'm like, well, at least you know what you're doing.
I didn't. Honestly, I didn't. I was just playing with it and experimenting and trial and error, you know.
Hey, it worked out. And then as we mentioned in the other one, you know, I was able to bring you out for Maker Faire. You were able to film with that. We did really, I think your breakout episode was really when we did the testing the camera rigs in the ocean around Thanksgiving. And you shot what is now just been the epic video of me ever since, where I'm coming out of the water with the coin. I can't see the coin. Danielle can't see me, but somehow she tracks me in the water coming out, and I'm
that was like a once in a million shot.
One time take, because I was legit hypothermic while we were filming that. I could barely come up with the lines to yell, welcome to Make It with Calvin. I'm Calvin. Danielle's filming, and we're out here in the ocean, and then Danielle goes all selfie mode with the camera, like something like that. And it's like, just, yeah, I mean, it's like, and then it's kind of like things evolved from there, where it was like, we didn't really do any day trips necessarily that made it on camera. Like, the real breakout was when we did Death Valley.
Yeah, I mean, we did do like some LA trips and stuff like that, and I think we did do some filming for that, but again, that was kind of more,
that was day trip.
That was more recreational stuff. That wasn't stuff that we actually made into a video, from what I remember.
I think that was also kind of like prep for Maker Faire, to get you comfortable filming around a lot of people, because you had your bright safety orange camera rig and there was no hiding that stupid thing. You know, it was not inconspicuous at all. But I know some people get, very nervous filming around other people, which I completely respect that and I understand that. But I wanted to make sure that you weren't going to get out to Maker Faire and then just see a crowd and just be like, I can't do this. I mean, I wouldn't have been upset at you. I would still say, hey, go have some fun, and if you feel like filming, film it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that you felt comfortable doing it. And that, I think, is a big thing that, is involved.
Yeah. And then, yes, Death Valley was the trip where, for one thing, that was our first camping trip. That was our first overnighter.
Yes.
Yeah. And
crammed in the back of the Trekker tank. Ripperoni.
Oh, yeah. My precious 97 4Runner.
That thing was epic.
Yeah, there's a story right there that maybe that'll make it in a different episode. But yeah, and yeah, it just kind of grew from that. We found that we could travel together and not be at each other's throats half the time.
I'm not going to name names of people who I've traveled with, but I've traveled with groups of people. I've traveled with a couple of people. And yeah, it's one of those things where I am very particular who I travel with, because I'm not going to lie, I get stressed out very easily. You can attest to this. I can get a bit grumpy sometimes. I can beat myself up a bit too much when things don't go right. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, I was very much, I'm not going to lie, when we went to the Death Valley trip, I was very nervous. Like, this is make or break for the two of us. Like, can we actually pull this off and make it work? Mm-hmm. And when it worked, and we had a blast, and we weren't at each other's throats the whole time, and we might have encountered problems, but we worked through them. We were very flexible. I'm like, dang, this is what traveling should be like, instead of everybody at each other's throats the whole time. And I really have to hand it to you for making me remember that I can travel with other people, and I'm not constantly just like, why am I doing this? And I greatly appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's a question that I will ask. What exactly do you look for when you're going to travel with somebody, as far as just, I guess, compatibility, if you will?
Well, for one, I'm going to sound like I'm totally beating up on myself, but I'm just being perfectly honest here. Somebody who can definitely deal with my cynicism, my sarcasm, my snarkasm. The fact that I'm not going to lie, I do get frustrated, I do get anxious, I do get depressed very easily. I'm just not trying to grovel for sympathy. I'm just being very honest here. Somebody who can see that, but also not take it personally if I get a little bit grumpy because things don't go right. I'm not saying it's an excuse by any means. We all have our moments. We all have that thing that gets us a little bit frustrated, gets us a little bit testy. But it's nice to know that the other person can kind of see through that and go, okay, you know what? You're just a little bit frustrated. You let it out. I'm really sorry I said what I said, and move on. And well, case in point, I forget what it even was on a trip where you kind of got snippy at me, and then later on you're like, hey dude, I'm really sorry, I was kind of a jerk. And I was like, hey, don't even worry about it. I appreciate you apologizing, but it didn't even bother me because we were exhausted at the end of that day. We still had to drive like 2.5 hours to get back to our campsite. I was kind of cold. And it was like but the fact that you were able to acknowledge that, hey, I was a little bit grumpy. I probably said something in a way I shouldn't have. That's one thing I look at in somebody is I'm very much the kind of person where it's like, if you're stressed out, hey, I'm kind of stressed out right now. I might be a little bit grumpy. You know what? I appreciate you being honest about that and being open instead of just keeping it inside and just being like, oh, if I say anything. I think that's the big thing, is just being open for communication, being open for, if things go right, if things go wrong, and just realizing that even though we are really good friends and we've done this a lot, there's still moments where we might get a little bit frustrated with each other. But the fact that we understand that and we can deal with that and not take it personally, I think is something that I'm looking for in somebody, not somebody who's just going to be a drama queen because some little thing went wrong. But the other thing is adaptability. I mean, case in point,
that would be what I would say is what I would look for when going to travel with somebody. It's like everybody has their preferences, and it's a give and take kind of thing, because you may travel with somebody that, you may want to do certain things that other person is not really thrilled about doing. And you have to be able to compromise. It's like, maybe it's something that you will go off and do on your own and then you'll meet back later. Or maybe you will indulge this person because you know that it's something that they really want to do. And you never know. You may actually enjoy it more than you thought you would. But that's the thing. It's like somebody who's adaptable for when things go wrong, because things will go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
They just will.
We could have a whole series called Trips Where Things Went Disastrously Wrong.
Oh yes, that's going to be another episode for sure. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not asking to have somebody that it's like, I want somebody who's going to be completely calm and collected when things go wrong, and it's like they're just going to be a stone face, because that's just not realistic. So yeah, people are going to get stressed, but being able to work through that, being able to not focus on what's wrong, and it's like, okay, this didn't go the way we wanted to, but how can we work around this? How can we fix this?
How can we move on? How can we rectify it?
Exactly. And also adaptability in the sense of being willing to try new things, try a bunch of different things that maybe you hadn't done before. Because that's one thing I think that is a little difficult for me, is if I go someplace, it's like, I'm just kind of this way. I want to try to do like a lot of things. Sometimes I overdo it as far as like, I want to do this and that and the other thing. It's like, let's go kayaking here, let's go river rafting here, or all this stuff. And sometimes that is a little too much for somebody who maybe wants to keep it more low key, and I understand that. But at least somebody who's willing to at least try some of those things, because it really isn't.
Also, you kind of need somebody to be like, hey, I know you really want to do all this, but I think we can only do this much.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, it really isn't fun to go to a place where you've never been before if somebody isn't willing to do hardly anything. So it is helpful to be with somebody that it's like, I mean, yeah, they may not necessarily want to do everything that you want to do, and that's perfectly fine, but it's like, hey, you know what? This actually sounds like a good idea. Let's go do this, and then have a heck of a time. Or maybe they have some suggestions on stuff that they want to do that maybe I am not initially interested in, but, again, that
It's
give
a
and
give and a
take.
take, yeah. Well, I mean, great case in point in that is when we did our mega multi-state road trip, and I was dying to go see the Hall of Flame in Phoenix, the firefighting museum, which was awesome. I'd seen it as a kid, and I'd never been back since.
Yeah, that's kind of his thing, is museums. He you know, hashtag nerd here.
Proud nerd. I mean, or the other one was like the Atomic Museum out in
Albuquerque.
You know, it's kind of like, that's not exactly something that you're into, but you got to experience it because that's something that I was into. And then I know that there's things that you've wanted to see and do that I was more a little bit, you know, I was also a little bit like curious about, but I wasn't like 100% into, but I ended up enjoying it.
Exactly.
You know, and it's that two-way street, but it's nice to get to experience things. And even if you don't like it, hey, you know what? You figured out you don't like it. Well, now you know you can go do something else.
Exactly.
You find out a lot about yourself, though, by doing that, instead of just being like, well, this doesn't look interesting, I'm not going to do it. You go out there and you try it, and you're like, okay, you know what? Maybe this wasn't my thing, but I actually did enjoy this, so maybe I'll try that again and go from there.
Yeah, and that's another thing, is also not being afraid of failure. Like, say we go when we do something that we think, oh, this sounds like it would be kind of cool, and then we go and we do it, and it was kind of disappointing. And it's like, okay, that wasn't exactly as incredible as I thought it was going to be, but, you know, hey, lesson learned. We know to, you know, spend our time and resources elsewhere next time.
Yeah, or we kind of figured out, hey, you know what, maybe the things that are all over the tourist map aren't the thing worth hitting, but there's still a lot of really cool stuff to be seen if you go a little bit off the beaten trail.
Exactly.
Literally and figuratively.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah, so I guess piggybacking off of that, what is one thing that I personally was really interested in doing that you weren't necessarily 100% on board with, but ended up being really fun for you?
Oh gosh.
I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
Well, I'm going to say that's a hard one because I'm trying to remember kind of like even things that not necessarily, well, I mean, paddleboarding was one of them, but we already kind of touched on that. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of like places we've been to or things that we've done, because we've done a whole crap ton of stuff.
It could even be like a hike or something like that.
Gosh dang, that's a hard one. Thanks for putting me on the spot, Danielle.
Well, okay, how about this? I'll start with my end of things, because yeah, as you were mentioning, there were things that you wanted to do that wasn't really something that I personally would seek out, but it was fun to do.
Yeah.
So, case in point, you had mentioned the Hall of Flame, which, by the way, that was actually really cool. But the other thing, because he's really a train nerd.
Oh,
and
jeez. Oh, gee, let me think. I didn't spend like $1,500 to do Iron Horse Camp at the Nevada State Railroad Museum. I totally didn't go out a couple weeks later for Great Western Steam Up.
So, yeah, we went on a trip once. This was when we were going on a road trip to go and visit Lassen National Park. And on the way, we were going to stop in the Tahoe area and then a little bit in Carson City, Nevada. And there was this museum he wanted to see called the Nevada State Railroad Museum that he had never been to before and he really wanted to check out. Now, I'm not one to seek out a railroad museum. That's just not my thing. But when we went, it actually was pretty cool seeing the different things that they had and seeing the different refurbished old style cars that they had. And did we see the steam engine the first time we were there? Well, they had them in the museum on display.
They had them in the museum on display, and then I know that they were running the little Edwards car.
Exactly. So we got to ride in that, and then, being the train nerd and the friend of all the train operators over there, real quick, you started striking up a conversation with them, asking them questions, and then I forget. Did we leave and then come back later?
No, we just stayed there.
Okay, so we stayed there basically until they were closing. And I think they also saw that we had cameras with us. And they came up to us and asked us, hey, do you want to help us move the turntable to, put the cars away for closing? Which I don't think that's something that they normally do. But because we were there and we seemed to be interested, or at least you were, it was like, Sure.
I remember Michael, who I got to know a lot better later. He's like, yeah, if you guys want to stick around and watch us put the Edwards car back, you're more than welcome to. And if you want to help operate the turntable. And most railroad museums, and understandably so, are very nervous to have people around the equipment. The railroad museum is very strict about safety, but they really try to let you get in there and do stuff. And it was really cool because they were like, I just wanted to be respectful. They're like, yeah, just stay a little distance away from the tracks and you're fine. But they obviously they knew that we could be trusted. And then it's like I was there helping operate the turntable to put it back, and I'm just like,
yeah. And as he's like, pushing the turntable around with like 3 other guys, I put one of the GoPros like on the tracks right there so that I can capture the moment. And yeah, that ended up actually being really fun and enjoyable. And again, it's not something that I think I would have necessarily gone to by myself, but you
legit enjoyed it.
I did enjoy it, and I think it was also fun to see you go gaga about it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, just Calvin as a kid in a freaking candy store in there.
Yeah, pretty much. So that was like the first one that I could think of that it's like, yeah, this isn't something that I would do, but it was still fun to do it like on that trip.
I'm trying to think. We've been to a lot of different places, and generally it's stuff that's kind of interested me, but I don't know. I'd have to say maybe Carlsbad Caverns just because of my knee.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, in short, I have crappy knees. They've been a big problem on some of the trips that we've done. And
it's something that we have to work around, but we make it work.
Well, yeah, we very much make it work, and I take a lot of pills, and I'm a grump off camera. I'm kidding. No, but it's like, I think I was kind of hesitant about that, because I talked to some people who'd been there who were like, it's really cool, but it can be kind of claustrophobic as well. I don't necessarily get claustrophobia, but they also mentioned that the pathway inside can be kind of hard to navigate. And I think for me, I was kind of like, well, hey, even if I see a little bit of it, and Danielle runs around with the camera gear and has a blast, big deal. Have fun. Knock yourself out. But I think, honestly, by the time... Well, the other thing is we'd been on the road for days getting out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think, honestly, that was one of the things where it's like I was like, okay, this is probably going to be cool. But once we actually got in there and filmed it and whatnot, I was just like, holy freaking crap, this place is nuts.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was insane in there. So I think that's one of the ones that I would say I was more hesitant about, partly probably because of my knees, but even just in general, a little bit like, well, what are we going to expect when we get in there? But I am 1,000% happy that we went and did it, because holy crap, that was worth it. Because I think my biggest fear was we'd been driving for days and we had all these high hopes of going there, and it would have kind of sucked if we had gone all the way out there and it was just kind of like, oh, that's it. Because we kind of had to detour to get to Carlsbad to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
So we really had to go out of our way, because Carlsbad's like not even an hour from the New Mexico-Texas border. And we actually got there so early, we actually drove into Texas for a minute to go check out Guadalupe National Park, and then drove back to kill time. But it's like, I think I would have been really disappointed if we had taken all that time to go out there and see and do that, and it wouldn't have been worth it. But it was totally worth it.
Totally worth it. And we'll definitely talk about that in more detail in another episode, whether that'll be like an overview of the Southwest trip that we took, or if we're going to do like individual spots. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is a general gist of, how this whole thing got started.
And how we keep it working.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you said before, there are times where we do get on each other's nerves. There are times where he's a little wired up, and then there are times where I am snappy because, maybe it's that we're tired or we're hungry or just frustrated about something. But it's one of those things where it's like we accept that those situations are going to happen sometimes, and we move past it. And we also acknowledge that, yeah, maybe we weren't really being gracious in that moment, and we make up for it.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, is just realizing that not everything's going to be perfect. Things will go wrong, but it's how you handle when things go wrong. That's the important part.
Exactly.
And also just, I will say, I think society has become way too sensitive. I'm not saying to be a jerk, but also cut people some slack. Not everything is an intentional attack on you. I'll put it that way. But yeah, I think that's some really good advice, because yes, traveling is stressful. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It can be very stressful.
Yeah.
But in a sense, if you know how to handle that stress and that anxiety, you can actually kind of use that to help kind of propel you along to go and see and do more.
And also, it's like, I have done some solo traveling, which, yeah, we've both,
a lot of solo traveling.
We've both done some solo traveling, and solo traveling, it's fun in its own right, because it's like, yeah, you're basically trailblazing your own path, and you're seeing things, and basically you're running on your own schedule, and that's great. But in all honesty, at least from my perspective, it's always fun going with at least one other person. Like, I think it's more fun traveling with another person than just traveling alone, even though traveling alone can be fun.
Yeah.
Because then you get to see a place from a different perspective, a perspective that you could never make yourself, just because, you have your own way of looking at things. Somebody else has a different way of looking at things. And that's what makes it enjoyable, is that you can get a fuller experience, and also just, have fun together, especially in the dry moments, maybe when you're driving on a road where there's absolutely nothing to look at
for hours on end. That gets a bit monotonous, I'm not gonna lie.
So you talk about stuff. Sometimes maybe the conversations get really deep, or you just blast some music and sing along, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, I think that's a good stopping point, because the GoPro's almost dead.
Yes. So those of you that made it to the end, thank you for sticking around. Again, this is the Behind the Adventure show. I'm Danielle, and this is Calvin. Hopefully this episode was helpful and also inspires you to go out and live your own adventures, and hopefully live your own adventures with friends and family in your life. Yeah, that is it. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.